So as I was just saying, Dave, James, thanks for sitting down with me, but I've been a fangirl of this movie since South by.
Well, you were there at the beginning.
That's so cool.
So crazy.
You get to claim that.
Yes, standing ovation. What was it like for you guys?
That was a huge night for us for many reasons.
Yeah.
One of the sort of business reasons was it had been made by New Line, and they were so great and so supportive, but they realized that maybe the movie would fare better if it was distributed by A24 or a company like that. We didn't have A24 at the time. And so they didn't have to do it, but they allowed us to take it out. And so that screening at South by was the test. Like, that had to go well. Yeah. A lot was riding on it. But in addition to that, Tommy Wiseau, the real guy, was there seeing the movie for the first time. And he had always said that the book, The Disaster Artist, written by Greg Sestero and Tom Bissell, was only 40% true. And so
we based our entire movie off of the book. So
we actually had no idea if he would like it or hate it. And then afterwards, I was like, Tommy, what'd you think? And he's like, well, I approved 99.9%. And
y'all had to get him up on stage. I remember that. Y'all had to convince him to come up.
There was a lot.
So you were there.
There's a lot of discussion beforehand whether or not we bring him on stage, and if we do.
We were still worried that he, didn't like it, and that, we'd get that amazing reaction, and then he'd come up on stage and be like, nah, not true, or something. You know what I mean? Like, what a bummer. Mm-hmm. But then the real Chris R came up, remember?
Yes.
And so I was like, all right. And I looked out, and Tommy, he didn't look happy. And I was like, either he hated the movie or he's angry that this guy's getting
bummed.
attention.
Yeah.
So I tried to get him up, remember? And then he wouldn't come.
And the crowd.
Everyone started chanting.
They stood up and cheered.
I still get chills thinking about that because we keep talking about how that moment may have been the first time Tommy has heard unironic applause because our movie, we never intended to make fun of The Room or Tommy. On the contrary, we wanted it to be a celebration of him and a celebration of people who are going after their dreams and not taking no for an answer. And so when an audience of 1,000 people just start chanting Tommy, Tommy, it was really special.
Yeah, and then I did also sit through the second showing of The Room afterwards. I'm that girl.
Yes.
There you go.
But I'm glad you bring it up because when you just said the line just now, you put on the affectation of I don't even know if you did it just now, but you you got a little Tommy in you.
Any excuse.
What was it like being directed by your brother, who you know and love, but in Tommy-ism?
Yeah, what it like being directed by master director?
See, that doesn't faze me at
Greatest
all.
director ever.
I'm used to whatever he's gonna throw my way these days. But it was definitely an adjustment period, especially for Seth Rogen, who took about 2.5 weeks to fully get used to him in character, to the point where he couldn't even be in the same room with James unless he was actually in the scene with him. But I don't know, it just added to the whole meta weirdness of it all, and ultimately I think just put us all in the right headspace.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And then obviously embodying him, I want you to talk a little bit about your kinship with Tommy, and then yours also with Greg, because you're portraying real life people, so that's kind of a hard thing sometimes.
You mean my kinship with the actual Tommy, or getting into the character, or both?
No, him, because I feel you as a director and him as a director, I've heard Seth talk about it, that y'all have kind of a little brotherhood a bit, because maybe people don't always get your vision as well.
Well, when we made the movie, all I knew about Tommy was really what I'd read in the book. But in addition to that, I actually was given this amazing gift by Greg Sestero. Tommy used to record every phone conversation he ever had. He would drive around in his car with those old-fashioned tape recorders with the actual mini tapes, and talk to himself and have very emotional, deep conversations with himself. I don't know what he ever intended to do with these things, but 20 years ago, Greg took some of those tapes and digitized them, and Tommy knows I have them now, so it's not unethical or whatever, but I got these incredibly private moments. It's I call it the audio book of Tommy's journal, read by the man. And it was, as an actor getting in the character, it was incredible.
Congratulations on the film. I actually saw it at South by. I was there that night, and it was awesome. I know you guys weren't there, but you were.
I was there.
What was it like that night, seeing it with that crowd for the first time?
It was amazing. South by has been like very good to us over the years, and honestly, like several of our movies that ultimately were released well and received well and did well wouldn't have happened if we didn't premiere them at South by. They really like framed us in a way that allowed us to go on and succeed, which is nice. For smaller movies, you need that. And that night was crazy because the first time Tommy saw the movie, and we really didn't know what he was going to say or think. And there was the moment at the end where we all got up on stage and we were like, do we invite Tommy up? And I didn't want to because I kept being like, what if he just gets up and he's like, fuck this movie? Like, I was like, that'll destroy everything. Like right out of the gate. It'll just be like, go. And then they made a movie that the guy who it's about says it's not real and hates it. And like, it would have just been a nightmare. And then there was a moment where people kind of like noticed he was there, and it was almost like the end of this movie, where people kind of started chanting for him to go up on stage. And it was like one of the weirdest, and I was so nervous. And then he came up and he liked it ultimately and kind of gave it his blessing in his weird fucking Tommy way. But
99.9%.
99.9% liked it, which for Rotten Tomatoes would be a very good score.
Yes. Gotta just keep thinking about it. It's cool. It's no worse than I've heard. But for you guys, after that, I feel like I was a fangirl at that moment, but then I was trying to tell people, I'm like, James Franco and them have made this comedic masterpiece, and people were like, what? They didn't get it. So what was it like for you guys explaining it to people when you got involved, what you were doing?
Well, I think the problem with The Room is that last year there was a very successful Oscar-winning movie called The Room.
Yes,
So,
big confusion a year ago.
A lot of people thought we were making a movie about a Brie Larson movie.
Yeah.
They're like, which
I was
really
playing
don't get.
Jacob Tremblay.
And really good. He's really
Weirdly,
good.
that made more sense to people than when you tried to explain what The Room was.
Yeah.
When I said masterpiece, people were like, oh, so you meant that? I'm like, no.
I think it's tricky because The Room is still very niche. It's not out there. But I think what the cool thing about this movie is it transcends just being an inside baseball kind of movie about this very small movie, and it tells a story about people trying to create something bigger. And if you have not seen The Room, you're going to want to go out and see The Room immediately, and then vice versa. If you've seen The Room, that's perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so were you guys fans of The Room before? So when you knew going into it, right?
I didn't really know. I knew-ish a little bit. People had talked about it, and I didn't get it. I just didn't get what they were saying. And then when I watched it alone in my apartment, which is a horrible way to watch it for the first time, you're in just a pit of despair and reaching for people that aren't there
sport.
to be
Watching The Room is a
Also,
group
you
sport.
have to be trapped.
Yes.
I think seeing it in a theater that you can't leave is a big part of the experience. Because otherwise, your instinct is to just not because it's bad, turn it off. Just out of sheer trying to avoid the feeling.
just
You
you're
have
wanna-
to look. You have to look. It's like driving. You have to stay focused on it, or it's going to go away.
Or literally just oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. That's why
the
those
sex
group
scene is
watching.
whoa. But
It's crazy.
I do this podcast about bad movies, and Greg came on before he wrote the book, and that really opened my mind to the story behind the movie, which was so much more than you could ever think. Because there's a lot of bad movies, but this movie, the story behind it is legitimately fascinating. I mean, where did he get this money from? How did they do this? And the production that went on for months, and I think that is the most interesting thing, because there's so many bad movies, but there's not so many bad movies with a good story behind them.
Yeah. I mean, for you guys as artists, y'all put stuff out there, right? Would you rather have a Tommy moment, or would you rather have this small niche thing that nobody ever saw, where you're like, okay, I'm beloved by this thing that people kind of like ironically, or would you rather have this little cult thing, nobody sees it, but you love it? Which one would you rather do?
tough.
Yeah, it is a tough thing, right?
So would you rather have The Lobster or The Room? It's it's
That's pretty much it. It's it.
I mean,
Probably the lobster.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel
Probably The Lobster.
I think the hardest thing about having a Tommy moment is then what do you do after the Tommy moment? I think you can get more work by having
Yeah.
a small thing.
Lobster, you make that Sacred Deer movie.
Yeah.
there's
I
a
love
clear
that
there's a clear trajectory there.
Haven't seen it.
That's great. And then I also wanted to talk to you guys about James as a director because I feel like there's been a lot made about the fact that it took you a while to maybe not crack up when he was acting as Tommy directing. What about you guys? Did y'all get it right away when he was like, okay, he's gonna direct me as Tommy?
Well, it was weird because even though I'd done a movie with James like 8 or 9 years ago, this movie called An American Crime. That was about a child abuse case in the 60s in Indiana, which was a very different thing. But I hadn't seen him in years, so I didn't really, I feel like I didn't really meet James again until after the movie. Like, I forgot that he was different than the Tommy version of James.
Yeah, he was coming before all of us to get into makeup and prosthetics and everything. So by the time we arrived, he was already transformed, or almost transformed, and then, and he wouldn't be James again until he was done.
It's like weird to see him now.
Yeah.